Hey everybody, today I'm talking about my top 10 go-to board games. So these are the games that we often pull off the shelf when we cannot decide what to play, the games that my entire gaming group are familiar with, and they're almost like comfort food because we've played them so many times. Now before I get started on these 10 games, plus quite a few honourable mentions, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 10, I have Chin. Now, Chin is a tile placement game where you're placing these domino-shaped tiles on the board, and these tiles are often split into two colours or maybe one colour in its entirety. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to create surface areas of a particular colour to control it. However, when it is below a certain size, that particular region is vulnerable to be taken over by other players. You're also going to get points based on spreading out and reaching these different cities, and if you've got the most kind of regions touching that particular city, then you'll get to shed more of your pagodas. So this game has a real race aspect to it where whatever you're doing, you're placing your pagodas on the board, and once you get rid of all of your pagodas, you'll instantly win the game. But I love how kind of familiar this game feels because, you know, mechanically all you're doing is you're placing dominoes on the board essentially, but there are some really interesting little twists on the game, again, such as pushing people off, again, touching those cities, and that tension of, now I'm down to my last final few pagodas, so is my opponent. How can I make the optimal move to squeeze the victory? It plays in around 30 minutes. There's a couple of different maps. Perfect kind of, I think, weight to complexity ratio for a game that keeps you coming back for more. So that is Chin at number 10. At number 9, I have JustOne. Now this one definitely fills that party category of game. You know, when I have a larger group of players. Over the years, I've tried so many different party games with larger groups. A lot of them miss, and it always kind of reverts back to, you know what, let's just play some JustOne. I've never really had a bad game of this. People can drop in and drop out whenever they want to. Everyone's going to get the concept almost instantaneously, and it's just a home run, really, so you can't really go wrong with this very clever little word game where you are writing a clue on a dry erase board. I'm hoping to help the person with the clue card guess what the answer is, but once you reveal your answer, anybody with a duplicate answer will have to erase theirs. So you want to be a little bit creative with your answer, but not too far-fetched to the point where the person guessing won't understand the answer. So you know, if you're watching this video, I'm pretty sure you'll know what JustOne is all about, but it definitely has become one of my go-to party games that has never really fallen flat. At number 8, I have For Sale. Now this is actually one of the oldest games in my collection, and it is still going very strong, regularly getting to the table. Now this is an auction style game as you are bidding for these different properties. It has a very unique bidding system where you can either drop out of the round and pick up the lowest card or keep going to go for the highest value card. And then in the second half of the game, you're using the properties that you gained in the first half to gain these different checks, these cards with different money printed on them. You know, the higher the card you play, the higher the check you'll get for your final score. It's a wonderful game mechanically, definitely super smooth, very refined. This has definitely become one of those staples of my collection because, you know, me and my kind of core game group, as well as the people on the periphery, are all familiar with this game. So maybe if I'm meeting some friends that don't play games too regularly, but they are familiar with the hobby, this is always one we're going to go back to because I know they've all played it. Even if they haven't, it's going to be one to easily teach to them, but it still has enough gaminess to it to make it clever and just be a real fun experience that doesn't get boring, because every game can play out extremely differently just depending on the way those cards come out. So love this one. It's one of the best filler games of all time, one of the best auction games of all time, and the fact that it plays, you know, 25 minutes or so is just quite phenomenal. So that is For Sale at number 8. At number 7, I have Acropolis, which is one of the newest games on this list. Now this is a tile placement game that has certainly held its own and kind of stood above the parapet when it comes to other tile placement games, at least that I've played in recent years. So this is a fairly light one where you're placing these kind of triangular shaped tiles, which are essentially 3 hexes stuck on each other, and building your own little layout of your town. These different tiles have different colours on them, which will score in different ways. So some might say, you know, score for your biggest connected group. Some might say score for each of these that are on the edge of your board, etc. But I love the flow of this one. You're just bidding for these tiles or passing over the ones you don't want by playing cubes, and making sure you always have enough cubes in your supply to keep doing that, and then just focusing on your own little puzzle. I love the 3D aspect with this one because not only are you spreading wide, you can build on top to get bigger multipliers and get more stone to pass on the tiles that you don't want. But for me, because this one has replaced so many different games, such as Cascadia, Isle of Skye, lots of different tile placement games, I think this was a great one to go to. And again, because it plays in around 20-25 minutes, it is really remarkable how much game you get here in that time frame. So definitely one that I can pull off the shelf. Very quick rules teach. Everyone's going to get it straight away. And yeah, it's definitely always a good game. So that is Acropolis at number 7. At number 6, I have Biblos. So it's very rare that I'll actually mention For Sale without mentioning Biblos, because these two have always been at kind of competition with each other in the board game space for many, many years now. In my opinion, they're two of the best filler games of all time, and there is some comparison between the two as you have this kind of dual phase system and with a bit of auction going on as well. But Biblos I put slightly higher on the list because for me personally, I usually play at 3 or 4 players, whereas this game peaks at 3 or 4 players, whereas For Sale can go slightly above that. Now, Biblos, you are essentially spending the first half of the game acquiring these cards by bidding for them, or basically choosing to take some, giving some to your opponent, and then putting some on a communal pile. And then in the second half of the game, you're using money cards to buy the remaining cards in that stack. Then all you're going to do from then on is you're trying to collect sets of these different cards and manipulate these dice in the center of the table, which will show how many points each of those sets are worth. It's super, super tight. Definitely the smallest of margins can separate the winner and the loser in this game. But because not only do myself and my brother have a copy, my friend also has a copy of this one, we all know how to play it. If we have a spare half an hour, it's always one we're going to lean to and pull out on the table because it is such a good game, again, especially considering how fast it is to play. Immensely tough decisions, extremely tense at the end when it comes to the scoring with that big reveal, and you can always feel like you're in the game with this one, which is why I like it so much. So that is Biblos at number 6. At number 5, I have Caesar's Empire, another of the newest titles on this list. Now this is a route building style game as you are spreading out from Rome, placing your little legions and reaching new cities. And whenever you reach a new city, you are going to get a couple of tokens. Number 1 is going to be like an item token where you're trying to collect all the different types as well as duplicates. And you're also going to collect a tile based on the certain region that you've collected it from, and your highest of each of those regions will score points at the end. I love the additional twist on this one though, which is when you reach a new city, you're going to trace the quickest route back to Rome, and for every legion you pass through, that player is going to score points, whether that's yourself or whether that's your opponent. So you're always kind of piggybacking off other players' actions in this one. It's so approachable. It's kind of got that evergreen quality to it where you can teach this to pretty much people of all ages and they're going to get it quite quickly, but it still does have that certain complexity to it. Maybe not complexity, but richness to it where your decisions matter. It scales remarkably well. I prefer it maybe 3+, not so great at 2. But it's just so pure in the way that it works, and I've never had a bad game with this one. It feels like a big game that you can get played pretty quickly. Lovely quality production, maybe a little bit overproduced for the weighting of the game, but definitely one that I would never even consider getting rid of, and I regularly get this one to the table, and it's always a go-to game for me. So that is Caesar's Empire at number 5. At number 4, I have Rumble Nation. So this is a strange area control game where you're rolling dice in order to deploy your troops onto the board. Now, you're rolling 3 dice at a time. 2 of those dice are going to show the region that you go into. So say, for example, I rolled a 4 and a 3, that'll be going into region 7 because you're adding them together. And the remaining die is going to show how many troops you can deploy into that region. So, if it's a 1 or a 2, you deploy 1 troop in there. If it's a 3 or a 4, it's 2 troops. And if it's a 5 or a 6, you'll deploy 3 troops in that region. And you can split those dice however you see fit. Now, this game kind of feels a little bit lucky and a little bit kind of cheesy when you're playing it at first. But what I love about this game, which is why it gets to the table so regularly, is the consequences of your actions. Because once you've deployed all of your troops, you're going to trigger the scoring going from the lowest region to the highest region, region 1, then to 2, or sorry, 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, and so on. And whoever wins the lower region will bolster their support in the adjacent regions. So you can really think ahead here and plan multiple times, investing in those lower regions and hopefully build up enough momentum to end up kind of swinging the influence in your favour by the time it gets to those bigger regions. It's always like a light switch going off in people's heads when I teach this one to people. I would teach this to anybody, whether you are super casual, whether you are kind of a hardcore gamer, you're going to get something out of this one. And again, always one that I'll pull off the table if I'm playing with 3 or 4 players. So yeah, definitely a go-to. So much game here, and I absolutely adore it. And it should be on in so many people's more people's collection, because it just has all the hallmarks of a classic and accessible game, but sadly it's not that easy to get a copy of. So that is Rumble Nation at number 4. At number 3, I have Ship Shape. Now, Ship Shape is a strange one, really, because this is by far not my favourite game on this list. I still really like it, but there's some other games here that I would definitely prefer to play over this one. But for some reason, this one always finds its place on my table because, again, it has a certain uniqueness to it when it comes to the puzziness and that tile placement, because the tiles in this one are so unique in the way that you place them. So if you're not familiar with this game, you are essentially firstly playing a card from your hand in like a blind bid simultaneous selection way, where you're revealing them. Whoever's played the highest number will get to take the tile off the top of this stack and place it on your own little player board. Now, these tiles are essentially like a frame with different kind of things kind of coming off of that frame, which will give you scoring options in different ways. They can even give you negative things. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to cover up certain symbols on your player board, like these rats will score you negative points. You've got like the gold, which will give you pure points. You've got the contraband, which I believe gives you points as long as you don't have the most of them. And you also have the cannons, which you'll kind of score in relation to the other players. So very simple scoring system, but it's a very cool little puzzle when you're kind of manipulating these things, flipping them, placing them as best as you can, going on your gut reaction, not getting too gamey with it, in order to get the next tile that you want, to make sure you're not covering up all your best symbols that you've already placed on your board. So this is one that when I first got it, I was somewhat lukewarm on it. The more I've played it, the more I've liked it. And as I said, because it gets to the table so regularly, often do we have situations where, what should we play? You know what? Let's just pull Ship Shape off the table and off the shelf, and we'll get this one played really quickly. So yeah, for that reason, I can't fault it at all. If games are hitting the table regularly, that goes to show they have a certain quality to them to keep you coming back. So that is Ship Shape at number 3. At number 2, I have Ra. So Ra is actually one of my favourite games of all time. One of my favourite Knizias. This one is another bidding style game, but it is pretty unique in the way that it works, as you have fixed bids that you are using to acquire these tiles in this kind of push your luck system, as you're revealing more tiles from this bag and deciding, or being forced to at times, knowing when to trigger those auctions. And it's all about kind of getting the most bang for your buck by utilising those tokens, as well as thinking ahead, because whenever you buy a lot, you are going to get the last bid token from the last player who won a lot. So sometimes if somebody plays a 1 token and you're then buying the next lot with a really high value token, you've got that 1 to play with next time, which is certainly not a good kind of leverage point. Now, the gameplay is just exceptional in this game. I think it is wonderful, layers within gameplay here. But I think the reason this one hits the table so much is not only because me and my immediate gaming group enjoy it so much, it's amongst most of our favourite games, but because it scales so well. This game plays wonderfully at 2 players, it plays great at 3, it plays great at 4, I think it even goes beyond that, I'm not quite sure about that, but I always, as I said, my sweet spots are always 2 to 4 players. I always play at those player counts, and hence why this one is always a go-to game. I love teaching it. It's a game that has layers to it, as I said, so even if you have played it tons of times, you're still going to discover new things and be put on the spot to make those tough decisions. And those are the games that I really love because, again, they're so accessible, but they still pack a punch. And Ra certainly does that. So always going to be up there for me to be one of the best games ever. And of course, I want to play those best games as regularly as I can. So that is Ra at number 2. And at number 1, I have Rapido, also known as Escape. Now this is a silly kind of push your luck style game as you're just rolling dice, trying to be the first to climb up this staircase and reach the top. Essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to roll doubles. If you roll doubles, you'll instantly climb steps equal to that pip value. So if you roll 2 3s, you'll climb up 3 steps. But you're also trying to roll high numbers, because if you are quite confident in your roll, you can secure a spot on this alternative staircase, which means that if you are still on that spot by the time it gets back around to you on your turn, then you'll climb up that many spaces. So you can kind of bet on yourself, thinking, you know what, I'm really happy with this roll. I'm going to go right on that 5 spot, and hopefully nobody else is going to roll that high and won't kick me off. But if you don't roll as well, you can take a lower spot on that little track as well. So kind of 2 push your luck games mixed into one, and you have the highs and the lows here. A good racing system, because if someone's really kind of steamrolling ahead, you and the other players can conspire to try and kick them off that staircase, and so on. So I've had tons and tons of games of this one. This is one of the games that, again, I'll play with every single game group I have. I'll play it with ultra casual players. I even play this with my dad and stuff, who's not into gaming at all. I'll play this with my saltier gamer friends and so on. So always love this one. It is such a great game. Constantly hits the table for me, as you've probably seen in my hitting the table series. This is one that always comes out because I play it that regularly, and again, I'm not even slightly tired of it because I think it is that cool of a game. So that is Rapido at number 1. So there we have it. That concludes the 10 games on the main list here, but I want to talk about some extra ones. Maybe starting from number 11, I had Capital Lux, really cool blackjack variant card game. Cabo is one that I play regularly as well, because a lot of my good friends really enjoy that one. High Society, Coloretto, Patchwork is one that I always played a ton of at 2 players. Hanamakoji as well, No Thanks, Drop It, which is one that I regularly play with my family, who don't often want to learn new rules, War Chest, The Castles of Burgundy, and Marrakesh, not the Steffenfeld one, but the dice rolling one where you're moving around placing carpets. So just some extra examples there that I considered for the top 10 that just didn't quite make it. But that concludes the entire video, and hopefully you have enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.